Hi, I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and I'm bringing you along today because I've got some special gold indicator hacks that I want to show to you and want to teach you about. I'm doing a series on indicator hacks, and the series that I'm going to do today is about natural gold indicator hacks. This is things that are geology and other changes, things that you would see as you were going along in the field that don't necessarily show what some other guy has done in the past, but shows what nature has done in the past and how that will help you find more gold. So my first gold indicator hack in today's discussion is rock contact zones. We're going to show you that. You see behind me, right over here, is a slate rock. You can see it naturally breaks into little flat slabby pieces. And well, these are pretty weathered, so they break easily. This is unweathered, a gray slate. And gray slate is very common in the Mother Lode of California, and we're up in the California Mother Lode country. And I'm going to show you in just a second that just 100 yards down the road, you get into a different kind of rock called serpentine. And the contact of slate, like we have right here, and serpentine, like we have a little bit down the road, is a very productive gold-bearing zone in California. Now, there are other different kinds of rock contacts, and it isn't always slate and serpentine. Sometimes it's other kinds of rocks, but very often contacts of different kinds of rocks, and sometimes it's just a dike that's inserted into a larger area of another rock instead of just two kinds of rocks that come together. But that zone where the two rocks come together is often very productive. Here in California, almost all those zones where the two rocks come together, whether if it's slate and serpentine, are a fault zone. And they're very deep-seated fault zones that bring heated rock and hot water and gold-bearing mineralization up from deep in the earth to deposit up here. And that's why this is a productive gold-bearing area, because of this slate and serpentine contact. Now, hang on with me. I'm going to show you the serpentine. Because I've shown you the slate. Now let's look at the serpentine. Okay, so here, this grayish, greenish colored rock that's behind me, this is the serpentine. And only a little bit ago, we were there up in the slate. And this is the other rock that's contacted. And in the slate, there's a lot of quartz veins. Now, in this particular area, the gold is in the slate with the quartz veins. But the serpentine is actually the source of the gold. It's come up from deep within the earth. This rock is a rock that actually forms deep in the mantle of the earth and comes up close to the surface through deep-seated fault zones. And that's what's brought this up. And the heat that this brought up with it is what formed these quartz veins and led to the mineralization of the gold in the slate that's just a little bit up the road that I was telling you about just a minute ago. So remember that important gold indicator hack: contacts of different kinds of rock types. And if you know what area you're in, some types of rock types, or rock contacts, are famous for their gold production. And in the California Mother Lode country, the serpentine slate contact is a very productive one.
So this is a geologic map of the Mother Lode country in Amador and Calaveras County. And the purple line that you see drawn through there is that serpentine that I mentioned just previously. And you can show, or I can show you, that this line of serpentine, it stretches from one end to the other on this map, and it stretches far beyond on either end. There's actually a couple hundred miles of this contact, and there's some parallel contacts as well, some parallel bodies of serpentine. And for almost all the length, for most of the length, this is a productive area or a productive source of gold mineralization. So it shows you that learning to read geologic maps can be very beneficial and helpful for you as a prospector.
Another important gold indicator hack, natural one, is color changes in the ground. You can see here, this is kind of a brown color. This rock is one kind of rock. It's a brown color, and over here you have a gray color. And basically, a lot of times when you see a contact that you have a color change in different kinds of rock, sometimes it's different kinds of rock, sometimes it's just rock that's more mineralized. So you may have a unmineralized rock, and then you have a color change and you have mineralized rock. So in this particular case, that is the situation. The irony colored, the reddish, more brownish kind of color is the mineralized rock. So this is a color change contact that you want to see as an indicator hack for the presence of gold.
Here's an area that you can see in the foreground that the area is red and it's been bulldozed, you can see, and in the background the hills are kind of gray. And this is an area where, even though it's all the same rock, it's an area where it's been mineralized. That's why the area in the foreground has the red and iron yellow, the kind of rusty colors that you'd expect. And it's why they bulldozed it, because surprise, surprise, there's gold there. And the guy that you can see in the middle of the picture there was out metal detecting, and indeed he was finding gold nuggets. Here's another map from California. This is the Randsburg area, and the area I've kind of colored with a reddish color. It's the same rock, except some of the rock to the east is different, but it's the same rock as the whole mountain range, but the area that's colored red has been productive for gold, whereas once you get outside this mineralized area, or much outside it, then the rock doesn't yield much gold. You can see that where you have a color change like this, it can be real important. Either you're in the gold.
Not all gold comes from quartz veins. Sometimes there are things called gossans that are very productive, and they're basically an iron-rich deposit. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about these iron-rich deposits that form mostly from the oxidation of the mineral pyrite, which is iron sulfide. I'm going to show you a little bit more about that right now.
Now, gossans are an unusual kind of material that, they're rich in iron. Basically, they're formed by the oxidation of pyrite, and they look just like rust. This is a mine that the ore there is gossan, and I'll show you a close-up picture of what the ore looks like. Here you can see it. It's mostly like rusty, almost like a rusty powder as a lot of the ore. Now there's bits and chunks of rock that are not broken down that still have that rusty color, but the fine material, that has a lot of gold in it, and it's obviously a lot of iron. But I will tell you that not all gossans produce much in the way of gold. There are a lot of gossans that are very low or almost barren in gold. It's just some of them. So remember that when you're out prospecting.
Another important natural gold indicator hack is the presence of accumulations of quartz veins. I just said that not everything comes from quartz veins, which is true, but there are also a lot of bits of gold that come out of quartz veins. And so you want to be aware when you see accumulations of gold or of quartz vein matter on the ground, that that's a favorable indication for the potential for there to be gold there.
Now, accumulations of quartz and that sort of thing can mark a vein like this. There's a vein cutting from one side of the picture to the other, and you see the little bit of quartz that's kind of broken off and spilled down the hill. But that's the concept. When you see accumulations of quartz, it's oftentimes from a vein. Now, the vein can actually be buried. You may not see it outcrop on the surface like this one. It may just be a scattering of quartz cobbles that you would see on the ground. Here's an example. This is from the Sierra, and there's a scattering of quartz cobbles on the ground. Somewhere here, there's probably a vein. It didn't outcrop, so it couldn't be seen, but the quartz cobbles were, the white quartz was obviously visible, and sure enough, there was gold here. Here's an example from Australia. I went to Australia some years ago and spent 6 weeks prospecting there, and you can see the white chunks of quartz just scattered around on the surface. Again, there was no vein that was obvious as a source of gold, but sure enough, in these gravels on the surface, among the white quartz cobbles, there were nuggets that we were finding with our metal detector. Actually, I found quite a few nuggets here, and originally the guy who first found this was very successful and found many ounces of gold here.
Another important natural gold indicator hack is favorable rock types. Now here I am at some slate. This stuff has been very oxidized and weathered, but you can see that this is rock that naturally breaks into flat slabs. And rocks like this rock that what geologists call foliated rock, is a very important natural thing that hosts gold in a lot of mining districts. In fact, years ago I read an old report. It was about the 20 largest producing placer gold districts on the planet. Okay? And of 20, 19 of them had this kind of what they call foliated rock that naturally breaks into flat slabby pieces. Here in the Mother Lode country, slate and schist, rocks that break into flat slabby pieces, are very important sources of hosting gold and gold mineralization, and as a result, placer as well. So don't forget about the favorable rock types, because even though I said that foliated rock is a very common one, there are different productive rock types for a lot of different kinds of districts. In Montana and Alaska, a lot of the productive rock types are bodies of granitic rock, and around the edges of those granitic rocks, that's where you're going to get your favorable environment for forming gold. But here in California, it's this slate and schist that's the main rock type. So what I'll tell you though is, wherever you are, learn about your area and what is the positive and good host of gold deposits in your area.
Now, there's a lot of different kinds of favorable rock types. It really is something that's different for every area, but there are some things that go from different areas to different areas. Now, here I've got pictured 4 pieces of greenstone from very different locations, and I want to make sure that you understand that every green colored stone is not a greenstone. That's actually why geologists don't like this term and don't use it much anymore, because people confuse a green colored stone with what was called greenstone. And what this rock is basically a metamorphosed basalt. So it's a basalt, which is a black lava type rock that's been exposed to a lot of heat and pressure, and the heat and pressure have changed it into this kind of rock. But these 4 rocks are from 4 very different and very widely scattered gold fields. The upper 2, the one on the right, is from California. The upper one on the left is from West Africa. The lower 2, the lower one on the left, is from Australia. And the lower one on the right is from Arizona. Now, all 4 of these rocks are the same kind of rocks, and they're all closely associated with gold. There was gold at each of the 4 sites that I found these rocks. So it just goes to show that there are some consistencies, although it does vary from district to district, about rocks that are associated with gold deposits. Now here's some rocks from Nevada, and one of the things I talked about in the video was just this kind of rock that has a tendency to split into flat slabs, and you can see that here in this picture. Well, not every rock that splits into flat slabs is associated with gold, But in areas where is gold, oftentimes this kind of rock is closely associated with it. So remembering what is the favorable rock type for your area is very important.
Another important gold indicator hack is the correct topography. You know, in a lot of places, if it's too steep, the gold just isn't going to accumulate. In other places, especially deserts, where a lot of the gold concentration occurs because of wind or minor amounts of rain, you want the gold bearing areas to be flattish. So know what the correct topography is in your area, because topography really does make a difference. Too steep, gold can't accumulate. In desert areas, you want flat, but actually in the mountains, flatter areas may be too deep. The gold may be down too deep. So learn the secrets of your own area as to what the correct topography is.
Now, one of the things I want to talk about with respect to topography is the difference that it makes from different kinds of placers. Now, this is what would be considered like a desert or Aeolian type windblown placer. This is a placer that basically the wind and a little bit of water washes off material off the surface, and materials that don't weather, in other words, materials that are resistant to the effect of wind and rain and water and that sort of thing over long periods of time, those rocks accumulate on the surface. Well, you can see bits of white rock here. That's quartz. Quartz resists weathering. The black colored rock, the dark colored rock, kind of blackish reddish, is ironstone. That's another rock that resists the weathering effects of rain and wind. But also another kind of material that resists any kind of weathering is gold. And so in and among these rocks, there was gold to be found. And so these kind of placers concentrate at and near the surface by gentle washing away by water or blowing by wind. And they're well known in desert types of areas, although this, like I say, is in Australia. Here's one that's similar, though, in Nevada. And this is another windblown or Aeolian type of placer. This is northern Nevada, well known, called the Rye Patch area. Has produced a lot of nuggets. Now, if you're in the mountains and you're working streams and stuff, then you don't want it to be perfectly flat because, well, it won't make for a good placer. But you also don't want it to be too steep. Now I'm looking down a really steep little gully here, and you can see by looking at it that the bedrock is just about washed and polished clean, and there's hardly anything exposed, just a little bit of dirt here and there. And basically what that shows you is that if it's too steep, then placer gold won't accumulate. It'll just get blown on down the side of the hill. And actually, this little stretch of steep hillside, it even has waterfalls. There's about a 10, 15-foot waterfall in there that comes down the side, and then it just drops so fast that everything gets blown right on through. So remember, in areas where you're talking about river drainage, that the steepest part, a lot of the gold tends to be blown on through. But when you get down to more moderate grades, then placer gold will accumulate. And that's what this little diagram is intended to show.
Going along with the idea of productive rock types, is the extension of those rock types into adjoining areas. So a lot of times you'll have a situation where you have a gold-bearing area with a certain type of positive rock type that you recognize. Well, maybe a couple miles away that same rock occurs. Well, those are areas that you might want to check out, because a lot of times little known and poorly documented gold deposits will occur where that same productive rock type is found, but maybe a few miles away, maybe 5 miles, maybe even 10 miles away. So know about the extension of this productive rock type, or whatever the productive rock type is in your area, know about that and check out geologic maps to see where that same rock type extends to different areas.
Here's a map of historic gold mines in California, and you can see that they're not just scattered, randomly across the whole state in every area, but concentrated in clumps here and there, with, of course, the largest clump being the Mother Lode bearing part, the Mother Lode zone area on the west side of the Sierra Nevada range, and then the Klamath Trinity area up in the northwest part of the state. Those are the two most intense groupings of gold mines. But, pursuing these mines outside, or pursuing the periphery, the favorable rock types outside the periphery of most intense mining areas can be a real productive strategy. This is a geologic map of the Julian district in San Diego County, and it shows a blue rock type marked M. It's metamorphic rock, and it's associated with two different pink types that it's shown. One is labeled KGB and the other KGR, and GB is gabbro, and then GR is granite. Those are both intrusive type rocks. They look similar, except the gabbro will be a lot darker overall than the granite, which will be a lot lighter overall. But there's a number of mines in and around this M, the metamorphic rock, and pursuing these areas outside of the main Julian district, there are placers outside of that, and placers well worth pursuing. So it's interesting that, yes, there was a lot of gold mined in the main district, but pursuing favorable rock types outside the district, past the edge of it, can be a productive strategy for finding some good gold. This is a map of basically what is northwestern Arizona, and there's a number of different rock types here. One, if you look close, it's a kind of a light green color marked XM. XM is basically what it means is Precambrian metamorphic rocks. And it's interesting to note that all over this area, not in every single place, but all over this map, which is maybe 30 miles or more north-south and a good 15 or so east-west, all over that area, that XM in scattered places has produced gold nuggets to prospectors. Most prospectors would be familiar, Arizona prospectors would be familiar with the Gold Basin, White Elephant Wash, placers that are located to the the east of the main highway that runs through there. But there's gold to the west of the main highway too, and I know some people who've done really well working in the same type of rock to the east of the highway. So again, knowing what the favorable rock type is and tracing it around and following it to the right areas can be very productive.
Still another special gold indicator hack that I want to talk to you about is extension of mining districts. So a lot of times you'll know that a mining area has been productive, and this kind of goes along with the last point I made, is that around the periphery of a known district is often little documented extensions or sub-districts, you might want to call them, where there's been gold found, and you might not see those little areas mentioned in reports. And so you want to be able to check the periphery of known gold areas, whether it be hard rock or placer, that sort of thing. Adjoining streams, especially if they have similar geology, you want to check out those extensions.
Okay, so here's an area called the St. Louis area. It's part of the LaPorte, Howland Flat region, and there are just little placer mines scattered all over here. And although a number of them are shown, the area of placer diggings is huge, and there's large areas that have been worked in the past and produced a lot of good gold. So, pursuing the periphery of known districts to some of these little areas outside the main focus where the miners were working, you'll get smaller workings, but you'll get areas that people tend to ignore and may produce more gold for you. This is an area in the Bradshaw Mountains, and actually the darker lines that go across here are actually veins, gold and silver bearing veins that were mined in the early days, and tracing them outside of their main area of mining may be productive for you. This is a map called from what's called the MRDS mine map, and basically it shows that most of the mines are intensely in certain areas, but they are scattered outside. And that's again this point of pursuing gold deposits that are a little bit scattered, a little bit beyond the main focus of a mining district.
Another important gold indicator hack of the natural variety is accumulations of gold or of quartz vein matter in desert pavement. So a lot of times in the desert, the wind and the minimal amount of rain will literally wash the surface such that you get this accumulation of small to medium-sized rocks on the surface with little or no actual dirt or soil. And a lot of times plants won't grow in it, and sometimes they're pretty salty too. These areas where they have significant amounts of quartz vein material in the desert areas, they're good places to prospect and good places to check out. Quartz is actually an interesting mineral because a lot of minerals will decompose. I showed you here this slate and how it's decomposed. You can easily just break pieces of it. It almost crumbles into little bits. But quartz, on the other hand, quartz is a very durable mineral, and it won't erode and fall apart and decompose and that sort of thing. In fact, it lasts and lasts and lasts. And so it becomes a good indicator because of its durability on the surface indicates, and also because it hosts gold a lot of times. Durable and hosting gold, it's a good indicator. Keep your eyes out for quartz vein material.
I had mentioned accumulation of quartz, and sometimes you get these desert pavement type of accumulations, and you can see behind me a little bit in front, there's an area of white, a patch of white ground, and that is basically an area of desert pavement that's rich in quartz, and indeed there was gold in this area. So that is a good strategy.
Another important natural gold indicator hack is the benches alongside gold-bearing streams. Now, what happens as a stream erodes down any gully or canyon or whatever, it naturally cuts into the bedrock and erodes material out. And what happens is, a lot of times some of the gravel along the sides of the stream will get stranded as the stream cuts down. And originally it was here and it keeps cutting down. This piece will get stranded up above. And that is called bench gravel. These bench gravels a lot of times haven't been worked and are a great place to prospect, to dig along the bedrock, to use your metal detector, because they're essentially virgin gravels that have never been disturbed. And so you want to be able to recognize those in the field. So I'm going to show you some more pictures of those right now.
One of the most important things for prospectors to understand is hillside bench gravels. As a river cuts down, or stream, any kind of drainage way, it will leave behind, often on one side mostly, but sometimes on both sides of the stream, patches of gravel that were once in the river and part of the river, but are now stranded high and dry above it. And these gravels, if they haven't been mined, they're basically virgin gravels that will have all the gold they originally had in them. And so they can be an attractive thing for prospectors to seek out. Here's a picture of some gravel, and it just shows you. You can see it looks like river gravel. You can see the bedrock underneath it, but it's now stranded high and dry above the river up on a hillside. And this is probably 30 feet or so above the the highest the river ever gets. And you can see people have poked around and done a little bit of mining, and indeed there is some nice gold here. Here's another shot that shows old gravel resting on bedrock. You can see the bedrock underneath. The old gravels are perched on it. They've been left behind by the river. Another area, this is a desert area where people go out and mine, and you can see the river gravels. They're rounded. They look just like a stream, and they've been left behind. And so modern prospectors seek out these kinds of things, and they're very productive. Sometimes they're not very big. I mean, this is an example of a perched river gravel. You can see the round rocks. It's only just a small area. I mean, literally the little bench of river gravel is not more than 10 or 15 feet long and probably 6-8 feet wide. And so it's not very big, but hey, that's big enough to hide a good cache of nuggets. Another example along a modern stream, can you spot the bench gravel here? Well, it's up on the left side of the screen, up above the river. You can see a scattering of river gravel in a reddish brown colored soil. That's a bench that's been stranded by this river as it cuts down. And indeed, the old miners mined some of that, but there's still a lot of it left behind. And so it's a good and productive spot to check out. Here's a spot in Alaska that I worked. It was an old river gravel. You can see some of the rounded rocks behind my head in the background there. And a partner and I shoveled off all this material and dug it all out and ran it through a high banker. And I think we got about 2.5 ounces out of this little area. It wasn't very big, but it was very productive. Now, if you want to be a better prospector and find more gold, maybe even some spectacular stuff like this, then I wrote a whole book about prospecting. It's called Fistful of Gold because, well, that's the goal, is to find fists full of gold. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my book right now. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit more about my book. I wanted to be able to share the knowledge that I've gained about finding gold and how to be successful. And so I spent years literally writing this book, Fistful of Gold. It's more than 350 pages long, which is why I say it's an encyclopedia of everything you need to know about finding your own gold. I've sold more than 8,000 copies, and I've got a lot of really great feedback on it. It just is the most complete book on the market. It has information about finding gold that literally is not available in any other book that you're going to find for prospectors, because I took technical stuff from geologists and other mineral scientists, and I've translated that into language that the average guy can understand. You don't need a PhD to go out and find gold, but the information that scientists have learned over recent decades can be of a lot of help to people. So it's in this book. If you're interested about finding gold, panning, sluicing, nugget detecting, dry washing, the geology of gold deposits and how they form, it's all in here. And like I say, it's more than 350 pages long. So if you'll just go to the description underneath this video, you can take a look. I've got a link in there to take you to Amazon, to the site where the book is sold. And I think you'll really enjoy it. Take a look at all the people who've commented on this and have really liked the book. It has a very, very high rating for a book. And also, I have a website, my own free website that you can take a look at. I've got all kinds of information on here about doing research and how to find gold, a lot of good information, stuff that basically couldn't fit into my book. And so I put it on this website, and I have a link also for that in the video description. So take a look in the description, and you can click on the link, and it'll take you to my website. And finally, if you like this presentation, I've got a lot more coming out. Here's a 3.5 ounces of gold that I found a couple years back in one area. I've got a lot more of these videos coming on gold, gemstones, hard rock, placer, a lot of metal detecting. There'll be lots of metal detecting stuff. So if you really enjoyed this, click the subscribe button and then tick the notification bell off, and YouTube will let you know when I publish new stuff. And hit the like button as well. And please comment on these videos because I'm interested in what you have to say, and I promise to answer any questions you have. So if you are wondering about anything or think maybe I didn't cover something thoroughly enough in a video, then let me know, and I'll be happy to try and help you out and give you whatever information you need. So thanks a lot, and hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you again real soon.